Hello, my name is Adam Kendall, and I am here today to give a presentation on the Ku Klux Klan and the American Fraternal Press. Let me share my screen with you. In this paper, which will be published in a forthcoming AQC volume, is part of a larger group of studies that I've done in the past regarding Freemasonry, fraternalism, and the Ku Klux Klan of the 1920s, which is a different organization than which came out of the American Civil War. It's a story of American fraternalism and how it grappled with new groups taking the mantle and associating itself, or themselves rather, with other American fraternal groups. So the Ku Klux Klan, also known as the KKK, the Klan, and the Invisible Empire, is by far the most recognizable and feared of American organizations. It represents racism and terror in the United States at its worst, symbolically represented by its distinctive hood and robe. Few would argue that the KKK is rightly classified as a terror group, but its origins and early history as a fraternal organization might be surprising to most. This fact, while undeniable, is hardly surprising. American fraternal orders enjoyed an unprecedented popularity during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, inspiring a multitude of organizations to form lodges, knighthoods, aviaries, and so forth in order to promote a particular philosophy, to protect the nation, or some other goal. Fraternal groups, particularly in the United States, were both trendsetters and also copycats. Studying them can give insight on their social impact, how they influenced economy, fashion, language, or other facets of life. The Klan's origins as a fraternal society is a matter of course, but its heyday as one of the most popular has recently come to the fore as new rare information bubbles to the surface. Previously, the Klan scholars would note in passing their attraction to by other members from Freemasonry, the Elks, and so forth, giving the public a sense that this overlap was indicative of something dodgy with these orders, that they had nefarious plans, which inevitably fed into future conspiracy theories about fraternal orders. Thankfully, with the increased interest in fraternalism and the discovery of new information, which for Klan studies is quite rare, we can gain an insight into how the Klan identified itself with other orders, how it attempted to both eclipse and inherit Freemasonry's prestige, how its membership promoted itself in fraternal periodicals, and how it attempted, in light of a new social order following World War I, position itself as a super fraternity that gathered under its wing all others, turning them into a militant patriotic organizations charged with protecting the United States from its enemies, which were at that time foreigners, Catholics, and vice. In addition to all of the other groups that these hate groups have gone after. Perhaps the best investigation into the social currents which caused all American fraternal orders is in Lynn Dumenil's excellent Freemasonry and Civil Society, 1880 to 1930. There, she posited that World War I's wide-reaching impact required fraternities to rethink their purpose and to adopt a less insular and self-serving image. Up to this point, Freemasonry had a reputation of not only antiquity, but also being impenetrable. And it was seen by others as only helping its own members. As Freemasonry struggled with its own public image and how it could translate its precepts into what was clearly becoming a more of a global outlook, the Klan sought to incorporate Freemasonry's rich intersection with early American history and its revolutionary patriots as a front for their own social crusade, which can be best characterized as a muscular Protestant and white supremacist patriotism. Although women enjoyed a popular position in the Klan with the women of the Ku Klux Klan, or what's known as the WKKK, the Klan's overarching precepts of behavior were undeniably masculine. Their militancy and passionate devotion to conspiracy theories were drenched in violence and intimidation. Despite their flexing, the organization was conspicuously self-absorbed and posited that they were the victims of a morally corrupt United States, liquor, race mixing, jazz, civil rights, and so forth. However, they believed that they were defenders of the traditional values that had defined US exceptionalism. The Klan saw in Freemasonry's American lineage, including its historical loggerheads with the Roman Catholic Church, which they sought to use to justify their own prejudice. My presentation today will discuss this focus and more. It is the basis upon which the Klan made itself appealing to fraternalists, particularly Freemasons, using history, archetypical patriotic imagery, and mythology to normalize itself as a regular and appealing fraternity. This they did quite successfully in the Fraternal Press. We will also examine the Masonic response, which attempted to square its own perception of national duty with the diversity of belief regarding these issues within its own membership. At the heart of the Klan's marketing and the Masonic response is a conflict between two vastly different interpretations on claims to American identity and the application of law and order and governance. In short, for the Mason, it was always a peaceful submission and good citizenship, pride in one's own country, and the willingness to defend it when called to. But for the Klan, it was a fight against the enemies of the United States. And in this crusade, it was appealing to exact justice against them because they were just that, enemies. And so violence was justified. So with that, we are going to explore the Ku Klux Klan as it saw itself, or as others saw it really, in the American Fraternal Press, which was a basis by which they were able to justify their positions, propagate their ideology, and also market themselves all at once. You can see their personality come out and how this personality became normalized. So the original Klan began in post-Civil War in 1866 during the Reconstruction period, where the US, or the regenerated United States, sought to bring in the former secessionist southern states, enacting laws which, in short, caused massive economic and cultural changes. There was a reaction to this, and the Ku Klux Klan was one of these reactions, which extended the notoriety of the slave patrols, et cetera, and they sought to terrorize not only the newly freed African-American slaves, but also the Northerners, which they perceived as interlopers. These here, oops, one second. These here are two members of the Ku Klux Klan in their disguises. This is prior to the more famous pointy hoods. They would raid the countryside dressed in these costumes, dressed as ghosts, etc. Or that's how they perceive themselves. They were originally a fraternal organization, or that's what the history says, begun by several Southern sympathizers who were bored, apparently. But what they quickly became was a terror organization and less of a fraternity. And I also might mention that they were they were exclusively limited to the South. Now, the new Ku Klux Klan, the second Ku Klux Klan, the 20th century Ku Klux Klan, as it's all known, was a new organization. It was inspired by the Reconstruction Klan by Colonel William J. Simmons. He was a Southerner himself, and he undoubtedly had heard of Klan lore from his family. His father allegedly was a member of the original Klan, although can't be proved. But he sought to revive the order in order to battle against what he perceived as a moral slide in the United States. And ever the mystic, this he did when he was bedridden after an automobile accident, and he saw a vision of white knights on horseback riding across the sky. And he decided he would revive the Klan. It might be mentioned that the colonel that he has in his title did not come from the military. It came from his title as a recruiter for the United Woodmen of the World. He was a consummate fraternalist, and just like many men of his era, belonged to several different fraternal orders, including the Masons. And so undoubtedly his experience as a professional fraternalist, as he really was, that figured into his new Klan. He was also very interested in marketing, and so his new Ku Klux Klan began in the wake of a very popular film, D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which was based off of a book by Thomas Dixon Jr. called The Klansman. This movie is famous for many, many reasons, both technically as a film, but also for its extraordinary racist, or not even undertones, it's overtly racist. Simmons' Klansmen would appear at premieres of Birth of a Nation, clad in white robes and on horseback, and handing out leaflets for meetings. William Simmons always intended it to be a fraternal organization, and indeed the fraternal model is an extremely effective model to use if you're going to have an organization and draw people to you, especially at this time where fraternal organizations were at their highest peak, one could say. The post-Civil War saw the growth of not only Freemasonry and Odd Fellowship, but hundreds of others. So every night of the week, a man could join a different order and take part in it, and also involve his family, etc. So fraternalism, it must be remembered, was a normal event in society, a normal function in society. It was also an economy. Fraternal newspapers, regalia, etc., all promoted and drew in money and economy. William Simmons called his new order a high-class order for men of intelligence and character. That was his original intent. So the Klan itself, the second Klan, took on the prejudices that were very popular throughout American history. And it should be said that anti-Catholicism is not new in the United States, nor is it also, for that matter, new in Europe. But the Catholics in the United States were always treated as suspicion, and this is a carryover from the old world. They were considered second-class citizens, beholden to a foreign ruler. Protestants were suspicious of them for a variety of other reasons, but they were not allowed to hold political positions, or if they did, they were treated with extreme suspicion. This is perfectly shown here in this photograph from Puck magazine from 1884, showing the battles between Freemasonry and the Catholic Church, which has always been at a loggerheads because of the papal encyclicals of Pope Leo XIII, and also in 1884. So this is a contemporary response, and Clement XII in 1738. This is a rather humorous depiction, or intended to be humorous, but for me, it shows really the undertones at that time. And the Klan was a part of what is on the right, the Freemason Protestant railing against the evils of the Catholic Church. And this is in addition to the Klan's mortal enemies, the African American, Jewish citizens, etc. But the Catholic was considered a harbinger of crime. The church itself was said to have fostered poverty in countries, and it was part of the conspiracy theory that they were doing this in order to send poor uneducated foreigners to corrupt the United States. And this was the hallmark of Klan ideology, which was known as 100% Americanism. And so this was the Klan's own riff off of what was to become Americanism, or what was known as Americanism. And following World War I, this philosophy found a new foothold and was based upon the popular ideology of a sense of national pride intended to reflect a commonality of American identity. And so the Klan expanded this version into what I just mentioned was 100% Americanism. This 100% Americanism articulated a militant stance amidst a new wave of xenophobia and anti-Catholic rhetoric, directing toward anyone perceived as being un-American or anti-American, which would include the Catholic. In fact, an adherence to Roman Catholicism became synonymous with both. So during the First World War, American Catholics, in addition to all of the other prejudices against them, were perceived as being lackluster and having a lackluster enthusiasm for supporting the troops. In contrast with the Protestants, who heralded themselves as being more in tune with the country's needs. And this aspersion to Catholics' patriotism had been a common feature in the late middle and 19th century, as we have just seen. In the 1920s, you have the Klan publishing in their newspapers these screaming, fearful headlines: Rome fights to keep nomination in Portland. Papal political machine seeks to prevent Hall from getting lead in the Oregon primary. They're involving themselves in politics as well as in fraternal organizations. They saw this in a very apocalyptic manner, with Rome creeping into the White House and into Congress, corrupting the very soul and foundation of the United States. They, of course, were the response, marching through the streets. This is a photograph from the Ku Klux Klan and Prophecy, or rather an illustration by Branford Clark. This was published by Bishop Alma White and her ominously titled Pillar of Fire Ministries. In the far right upper corner, you see what I believe to be the New York candidate for Governor Al Smith, who was a Catholic, receiving a telephone wire from the Knights of Columbus, who was the Klan's mortal enemy. It was the Catholic Freemasonry as they saw it, but more than that, a secret army of the Pope, which the Klan was intended to rout as a army of Protestantism and what they believed was going to be a new Reformation. Here you see them carrying their banner of 100% Americanism and another banner of truth. It must be mentioned at this time that immigrants were indeed coming into the United States in a huge wave. The response was to assimilate them by what best could be described today as pseudoscience and social experiments, such as settlement houses, where they would learn about hygiene, but also how to breed out their worst instincts. There was a belief, neo-Lamarckism, which maintained that certain characteristics could be carried on through the genes into children, and it was the intent to breed it out of them. This was part of the mainstream American assimilation projects. Of course, there were others that were less dubious, but this sort of conspiracy theory mixed with pseudoscience was also in the mainstream. And so this contributed to the appeal of the Klan. Although the Klan felt that they had a more violent mission, rather. They also were intent on linking themselves with the true history of the United States. They identified very strongly with the revolutionary patriots of the American Revolutionary War. And here they are as Klansmen taking part in the Boston Tea Party. So the Masonic response to the Klan likely came about from the New York World expose from 6th of September until the 26th. In these issues, it described the handshakes, the rituals, and the violence that encompass Klan ideology. The American Grand Lodges certainly found out about this because one of the issues described their infiltration of Freemasonry, and indeed, several Grand Lodges had already experienced it. In my own state of California, they had already received letters, and several prominent members had been written to by local Klansmen intending on starting their own chapters, or claverins as it was called, or as they were called, I should say. The Fraternal Press became a popular forum for the Klan, and several of them devoted entire issues to them as if they were one of their own. Two of these was the Fellowship Forum and also the Searchlight. The latter, the Searchlight, was the official organ of the Junior Order of United American Mechanics, which was a fraternal organization described as nativist. The Fellowship Forum, however, was published by George Fleming Moore, who was a former sovereign grand commander of the Scottish Rite Southern jurisdiction, and it reported on the goings-on of Eastern Star, De Malay, Masonic lodges, etc. In each of these periodicals, you could read about fraternal life, and indeed, the Fellowship Forum described itself as a national weekly devoted to the fraternal interpretation of the world's current events. So if you were a diehard fraternalist, you could turn to the Fellowship Forum and learn about the world's events as seen through fraternal eyes, perhaps through allusions to Masonic instruction or what is going on with Freemasonry around the world. However, with the inclusion of the Klan, this fraternal interpretation takes upon a darker tone. Now, I have to have a disclaimer here that these, even though that these organizations sponsor these newspapers, this is not an aspersion to these organizations. This is what I'm reporting on is exactly as it happened when it happened. Within these newspapers, particularly the Fellowship Forum, they began publishing what best could be described as nativist literature intended to stoke fear and paranoia, the fear of being replaced, which is a common theme with white nationalism, and it also forms the basis of the Klan's ideology to proclaim itself a community that is set upon by a horde of enemies, fearful, but also alert and waiting for the moment when they could strike back. So they were ever vigilant, but always the victim. They also published articles that at best could be described as historical revisionism, such as Lincoln assassinated by Roman Catholics. This was a long-standing conspiracy theory, probably stemming from the fact that the boarding house where the assassins stayed, Mary Surratt's house, she was a Catholic, and her son, who escaped, had protected himself by taking refuge in churches. This is definitely a different take on why the Roman Catholics are involved in it. According to the actual history, it has nothing to do with conspiracy. But to the Klan and to anti-Catholics, Lincoln was a victim of a Romish plot hatched in a Roman Catholic home. And that Grant, Lincoln, and the Ku Klux are against political Romanism. So the Klan is aligning itself with heroes of the United States, in an effort to become one with them, in an effort to legitimize themselves. And indeed, this is what they're doing by even publishing this in fraternal periodicals. Now, the Klan had larger designs, and several of its members and supporters wished to align all fraternal organizations under one umbrella, which was for as we'll see in a few minutes, a national organization of patriotic fraternities. This is an advertisement in the Fellowship Forum, 1922, for a book called Rome and Congress. Again, it's stoking the fears of a Catholic infiltration. Which will you choose, Freemasonry or the Pope? They posited this fear on an impending apocalypse or new revolution or a new Reformation, whereby the armies of the Catholics, led by the Knights of Columbus, of course, would battle the Protestants, which of course would be led by the Ku Klux Klan. And this had appealed to some of the members. Already they had engorged themselves in stories of knighthood. They received titles of Knight Templar, etc. And so this willingness to take that on that mantle, literally as a knight of truth and freedom, or so they thought, these fraternal titles would indeed make them knights. It agreed with their sensibilities. Their fraternal lessons became one with their politics. And so here we have the Fellowship Forum now promoting a militant Freemasonry. The Fellowship Forum stands for a militant Freemasonry. They're calling Masons to stand up, to align themselves with these military organizations or paramilitary organizations such as the Klan, to fight against the enemies of vice and evil. So their idea is, if you were to be a Mason, you are to stand up against immorality and vice. And the Klan felt it was perfect for Masons to join, since it was perfectly designed for that. It was not only philanthropic and took care of its members, but it was also secretive, and it also was highly organized. It actually proclaimed itself to be better than Freemasonry and all of the things that Freemasonry said it would do. This is appealing to the patriotic sensibilities of Americans, to align themselves with their revolutionary forefathers, to be a patriot, to fight against injustice and invaders. And they invoke the Minutemen of 1776. You were called like those Minutemen were 146 years ago. The founders of this organization are creating at the nation's capital a clearinghouse for the patriotic activities of all 100% American fraternities and societies. And this is the advertisement for the National Council of Patriotic and Fraternal Societies of the USA, of which George Moore and also William J. Mahoney, who was a leader in the Ku Klux Klan. They were at the head of this. Again, here's another advertisement, alerting patriots to join their organization. And this National Council of Fraternal and Patriotic Societies is really, truly a front for the Ku Klux Klan. So normalizing the KKK, the purpose of advertising in these newspapers was to not only propagate their ideology, which was capitalizing on the fears of most Protestant Americans during the 1920s, during this time of great social change. They wanted to normalize the Klan. And in doing so, they would publish articles alongside other goings-on of fraternities, such as the role of Masonry in the history of America, the Ku Klux Klan and Masonry, crowds thronged formal Masonic temple opening, and then on the side here, Klan's efforts shown in Texas. To report upon it side by side with other Masonic goings-on was to show that it was a part of Masonic or fraternal life in the United States. There were even clever advertisements, such as this one for a tailor. Notice the "keep us cutting 100% nifty," KKK. It's all a big wink and a nod, right? You could also buy regalia in these newspapers, including knives, pocket knives, and tchotchke with Klan symbols on it. They also normalized the Klan by popularity, showing that there was indeed an audience for this sort of fraternity. The top one is very shocking, with 15,706 Klansmen attending a picnic near Waco, Texas. And the Klan did this often, reporting on their initiations, or as they called them, naturalizations, where thousands of men would show up to be inducted into the Klan. Here's another class of 1,000 initiated by Klansmen of the Keystone State near Homestead. And then also Klansmen initiate 450. 300 were in robes. They're always reporting upon the majesty of these knights on atop horseback, wearing their satin robes, and the lines of cars and the excitement, right? This appealed to the fraternalists. This appealed to people engaged or hungry for spectacle and also purpose in life. The United States following the war was a great, as I mentioned before, was a lot of social change, a lot of unsurety. Economic woes were just around the corner. And what they believed was the world was now gone because of the war. The Klan was known to show up to places such as churches and give gifts. They were they proclaimed themselves the greatest charity. And indeed, they did, although they did it quite secretly. But their altruism and their philanthropy was largely an act of intimidation. Where here, the Spencer Church visited by Klan, they gave $21 for a children's camping trip. But they show up in their hoods, very silent, wave their arms around, and then they disappear. Facing the audience, the four mysterious figures raised their arms in outstretched position just for a moment, and then folding their arms, walked out of the church. Now, it's all very nice to give money for a child's, or children's camping trip, but it's quite another to show up in white hoods and sheets, wave your arms about, and then just leave as a ghost. This contributed to the acceptance of the Klan, but also, the awe for those who were in agreement with them, but also the fear of them too, because you knew that behind those hoods were men that were well placed in the community. Indeed, some of them were politicians, some of them were policemen. This one is one of the most shocking. It shows a normalization of the Klan and Freemasonry, where Masons and Klansmen attend a funeral. And here in the photograph, you see the Masons to the right in their white aprons, and then you see a small group of about 6 or 7 Klansmen in their white hoods and robes. And it says, under the impressive funeral ceremonies of the two greatest secret organizations in the world, the Masonic Order and the Ku Klux Klan, the body of Robert H. Skaggs was given the last funeral rites and burial by these two organizations. So it shows it, and it also says it, that these were the two greatest organizations in the world. So even if you did not agree with the Klan, you might get the impression that the Klan and Freemasonry were nearly one and the same, and they were two to be feared. The Masonic response was not so swift, but it was decisive. There were some that chose not to deal with the Klan, saying that it was not a Masonic organization, so they had nothing to say about it. But a number of Grand Lodges, California being one of them, spoke out against it, saying that the activities of the Klan, and they were very careful in the way they were wording this, because they knew many of their members were becoming members of the Klan. So rather than start literally a holy war, because perhaps you could not be in agreement with the Klan, but still did not like Catholics, rather than turn them off on the basis of religion, they decided to attacked the Klan on the basis that their vigilantism, which they were known for, was un-American. Their kangaroo courts, their harassment, which many mainstream Klansmen would say never happened, that they were being set upon by copycats or those who would try to undermine them by giving them a bad name, by doing violence in the Klan, under the name of the Klan. However, the vigilantism was well known, and so the Grand Lodges went after them based on that, stating that you could not be a Mason and a Klansman on the basis of this un-American behavior, that a Mason was to be a peaceful citizen. The Grand Master of California, Burke, he took particular heat. Several of them, I have to add, were harassed and some received death threats, but Burke was dragged through the mud, probably because in 1914, he was involved in a small scandal in the Grand Lodge of California, whereby he and several other high Masonic officials had defended the Knights of Columbus. There was an oath being circulated claiming to be the oath of the Knights of Columbus, which turned out to be a forgery. But because they'd signed their names as Masonic officials, many anti-Catholics got very upset. And so he likely got in trouble with the Klan because of this event. They remembered what he had done. And he was accused of being an agent of the Pope, being a secret Knight of Columbus, et cetera, et cetera. So he appears in these fraternal papers quite frequently. They use a demeaning language for him and others that are they wish to make an example of, basically labeling them Catholics through their language. So Grand Master Burke, charged with taking throne of authority. That's an allusion to the throne of the Pope. There's another where the Grand Master is issuing a bull, such as a papal bull. Part of normalizing the Klan and Freemasonry and also popularizing it, William J. Mahoney, who was an official in the leadership of the Klan. He was an imperial kleagle, which is sort of a lecturer, a grand lecturer. He is constantly shown as being or labeled or advertised as being a 32nd degree Mason and also a Klansman. He wrote an open letter to the Grand Masters of the country where he defends the Klan, always with them. It's that they are misunderstood and that others are trying to demean their good name. He says, "We are not anti-Catholic, but Catholics are anti-Klan, for they see in the Klan a real Protestant movement sworn to champion and to proclaim those Protestant principles that are the sources and bases of our real American Protestant civilization. We are not anti-Negro or anti-colored of any kind, but the colored and the mongrel races are anti-Klan because they see the forming of a powerful white man's organization, sworn to preserve the white man's race and all of its prestige and to maintain the purity of white blood. The Ku Klux Klan stands for undivided, unqualified, supreme, and exclusive allegiance to the government of the United States." This is very, very loaded language, extremely offensive by today's standards, but it also shows the mean-spiritedness of the Klan and how they believed that they were in the right and that anybody against them was to be dealt with. And so even though they proclaimed themselves to be in allegiance to the government of the United States, if you were any of these groups, you were thereby against those precepts. You were against the government of the United States, and it was their duty to deal you a heavy blow. So the enemies of the Klan were to disrupt Masonry and thereby undermine the rest of the United States. This was the plan of the Catholics and the Jews and the liquor distributors, et cetera. All of this was wrapped into one gigantic, very, very scary conspiracy. Another outrage falsely charged a Klan in North Carolina. law violators conspire to blame their acts on the Ku Klux. Everything was a false flag to them. Now, the Masonic response was largely through correspondence with their membership. Very little came out in the American press except to show, or the American Fraternal Press, except for a few examples. This was in the American Mason, which was a national publication. Masonic officials fight un-American Ku Klux. In every instance, the Masonic response, whether private or public, is addressing the un-Americanism of it. That despite the Klan's overtures towards allegiance to the constitutions, et cetera, its violence is consuming the organization and thereby rendering its members un-American, to treat other Americans, even if you do not agree with them, with disdain and prejudice. By 1926, even though you see the Klan marching down the streets of DC, this is a very, very famous photograph and a very famous parade, the Klan was falling apart. It only lasted a few years, maybe 12 to 15 years. And because of its scandals, several of its members were caught, what best could be described as caught with their hands in the cookie jar. So they were embezzling funds, caught in sexual scandals, even though they were proponents of prohibition. Several of them were caught drinking, and generally engaged in the immorality in which they were supposed to be fighting. The heaviest blow came when D.C. Stevenson, who was a high-powered Klansman in Indiana, was accused of a rape and murder of a young girl. His trial, even though he received a very short prison sentence, his trial basically destroyed the Klan as it was in its fraternal form. Membership declined quite heavily, and mainstream members who did not want to be associated with unlawfulness quickly demitted. Did they get rid of, or did they withdraw from their belief systems? Probably not, but they no longer wanted to be associated with the Ku Klux Klan. And this is not the end, because we know today that this is not the end of the Ku Klux Klan. The 1920s Klan, it was national, it was fraternal, and it ended. But then there came another Klan, and each iteration of the Klan is factional, tribal, and very small. It's no longer a national organization, but it's still very, very dangerous. But as it is today, the legacy of the Second Klan left an indelible mark on not only American fraternalism, but also Freemasonry. So today there still is a stain of the Klan's mark. And the intent today of this talk is not to impugn Freemasonry in any way. It's to show how fraternal organizations rise out of social conflict or even good times. It's to show how, what could we best say about this? It's to show how less than lawful organizations can gain a foothold in any society. It's to show how we should probably remain vigilant to watch how we act and how we think towards others to whom we do not agree, that it may not be appropriate to form organizations which are at best described against the Constitution of your country. That's a very poor way of saying that it's a very difficult position where one person believes a certain thing and feels that it's their duty to rectify the wrongs of society. And with that, I'm going to leave you with your thoughts. Thank you.